for students from women's studies and gender studies disciplines all over India. This platform aims to mainstream the Department of Women and Gender Studies to make a way forward. So far, we have already conducted 8 webinars with eminent scholars and experts in women and gender studies from all over India. And this is our ninth webinar on time use surveys in gender analysis by Professor Ishita Mukopadyay. I welcome one and all present at here to the session.
Yes,
Professor Ishita, ma'am, just a minute.
yes. I'll just mute.
Okay. Professor Ishita Mukhopadhyay is a renowned teacher and researcher in economic and gender development in the Department of Economics at the University of Calcutta. She also worked as the director of the Women's Studies Research Center at Calcutta University. She has conducted several projects and research works for various national and international organizations, including Planning Commission of India, Center for Women and Development Studies, National Commission for Women, British Council, the Swiss Federal Institute of Science and Technology, etc. She has published several articles in reputed national international journals. Her recent publication includes Marital Status and Women Empowerment in India, published in Sociology International Journal, Emerging Challenges of Rural Labor Market, Insight from Indian Villages, published in Arthaniti Journal of Economic Theory and Practice, and Gender Wage Gap, some recent evidence from India, published in the Journal of Quantitative Economics. Last month, she has been selected as the president of IAWS. Congratulations, ma'am, from the team IAWSSF, and welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Ishita was elected, not selected. Elected, and she is the current president. So congratulations on behalf of All India Women Studies Students Forum. And the topic that Professor Ishita would be talking today is very, very important and timely. So let us listen to her, and at least around 45 minutes or so she'll speak, and then you have 5 to 10 minutes for discussion also. So over to Professor Ishita.
Yes, thank you, Mani. Thank you, Professor Mani Makalai, and all of our students and researchers and all interested persons in women's studies. Now, I will be sharing a screen because I'll be using a PowerPoint. Okay. So, yes. So can you see the screen? I think you can see the screen.
Yeah, it is
so
there.
Actually, I'll be talking about the time use surveys in gender analysis. It's a different kind of a survey because you need surveys in gender analysis because generally the data or information regarding the difference between men and women is not coming out from historical times. We know that there is discrimination, there is difference, but the information about this is not coming out. So what to do about that? This is a time use, talking about time use survey. It is more relevant because in just 2019, India had a wide ranging all states time use survey data. Now, let me try to talk about why surveys are undertaken, starting from that basic principle. Now, undertaking surveys as part of research methodology is an old one. It's an old thing. Now, social scientists take recourse to this method of survey for their primary analysis of individual response. That is, even if as the data is not visible. So what happens is this, that if the data is not visible, then of course one has to go to the people, one has to go to the individuals to understand exactly what are their behaviors, what are they thinking, what decisions do they take, what discrimination they face. So survey is a method which is uh, something which is a basic and fundamental in the stream for women's studies. Surveys are undertaken for verification of what the data you are already having, what information you are already having. Suppose there is a reporter reporting of an event in a newspaper where you see the rape of a woman. Now, these are very common news. So when you do a survey in that area, in that particular village, you can see the response of the people towards that, the attitude of the people. How are the people looking at it? So now, understanding and the discovery of this data. So surveys are undertaken. Surveys generally take place at the point of time according to a specific design. Now, what is a design? Design is a scientific term. You know whom are you talking to. You know who are the people to whom you are talking to. So design needs to be scientific in relation to the objectives of your research, and response needs to be free from biases. Talking more about biases, because as you know that during this COVID period, you have been listening of many phone surveys. But these were exactly our criticism from the point of view of gender analysis, that a woman most of the women are not having phones. There is a discrepancy in possession of these phones. So whose phone the woman is using when you are asking? So she is speaking in front of too many people. So there is a bias coming in. We used to talk in terms of this. That's why don't you meet this person and answer? So this is one bias, but today my topic is um, not to take care or handle these kinds of biases, but I just give you an example to say that surveys are biased. There is a bias in all kinds of surveys you undertake. So the problems in gender analysis of this survey is that the specific features of the gender analysis, which can be problem in collection of data through surveys, from what are the sources of biases? These are, first, gender differences appear in the pattern of spending time throughout the day. That is, how men in the family are spending the time, how women in the family are spending the time. The most talked about term is the unpaid care work and household work are the areas which are widely discussed. But I will not be sticking to only unpaid care work and household work. When I talk about this special kind of survey, as you will see, women spend more time on household work than men, meaning inequality in time use patterns of men and women. Now, there is a paper by Mattingly and Sayre in 2006, which came out. If you search it, you will get this paper. This paper distinguished between free time and rushed time. That is, you can understand these are very simple terms in that sense, that what is a free time and what is a rushed time. That free time means when you're more relaxed and work, like a man entering into an office, having a coffee, and then having a chat with his colleagues and then sitting down to work. But a woman, even if she is entering into the office with a mobile phone on and she is rushing through time, she is asking that everything is okay in the household. Is my child taken care of? Did you take medicines? Were these vegetables okay in the freeze? So she is chatting with the mobile phone, doing the household work, and then sitting down to work. So you can distinguish between what is a free time and what is a rushed time. So Mattingly and Sayre were talking about this distinction between free time and rushed time. Women suffer from an increased time pressure, meaning There is an inequality in time use patterns of men and women. So the many kinds of difference, as you can see, the gender differences, they are not coming out in the data. They are not visible, but they appear in the pattern of spending time throughout the day. Now, there is an inequality. The source of this kind of time use survey is coming out from the inequality in the time use pattern. So as you can see, there is observed gender differences between men and women due to difference in gender roles in work and family. Why in the time use patterns? Because there's a difference of gender roles in the work and family. I'm also not going into details of this. I'm coming back to the focal point, the time use survey. There is an obvious bias entering in the survey outcomes when this inequality in time use is not controlled. Sorry, there is a typo here, not controlled. Meaning, what is a control? Control is also a scientific term. That is, you know that there is a bias, so you eliminate the bias by putting in some other information. So there is an obvious bias entering in the survey outcomes where the inequality in time use is not controlled. So if you do not control this inequality in the time use, then the way the men and women are spending their time, then there is a difference. It is difficult to control the mentioned inequality. The existing survey data is not without these biases, and hence we have to make corrections to these biases. So as you can see, whatever data exists is not free from these biases. Biases imposed by inequality in time use patterns by men and women. So this is a problem. But this problem has been tried to be solved by a time use survey. No problem is solved forever. So there are also problems with time use surveys, but I'm not considering that in today's lecture. So what is a time use survey? Using a time diary, maintaining a time diary, that is if you're given a diary and you write in the diary what you are doing at what point of time. So using a time diary versus the questionnaire method of collection of primary data. That is, instead of asking you, what did you do yesterday? What were you doing at 11 o'clock? What will you do 1 hour later? So you give them a diary and you write down, you're being asked to maintain the time diary. That is, at each hour, what you are trying to do. However, women's work in agriculture and household, particularly small home-based small production units, are grossly undervalued. I was telling you I'm not only talking about the unpaid care work, which has been highlighted. It's true, but there are also other invisibilities which are related to the socio-economic cultural profile of a community, like women's work in agriculture, grossly undervalued. When you see women of the family, agricultural family who are working, you call them wives of the farmers, but they are not visible in terms of their own work. So if you ask this woman to write a diary, time diary, you can gather down how much work she is doing. Naila Kabir talks about the dichotomy in the power relations, which is responsible for this. Amartya Sen also talks about the intra-household discrimination in consumption. Martha Nussbaum also talks about the capability deprivation. So if you look into these, all of them are exactly meaning inequality in use of time by men and women within the household. So use of a diary is revealing the inequality in terms of time use. Time is the variable through which one captures all kinds of inequalities. So we are trying to capture this in terms of a time use. Now, what is a time use survey? Time use survey provides a framework for measuring time dispositions by the population on different activities. This is a standard definition given by the United Nations 2005. Its primary objective is to measure inequality in time use, particularly as Indira Hirave puts it, as who has worked so much on time use survey. In its objective is to measure participation of men and women in paid and unpaid activities. But Hirave puts most of the emphasis on this discrimination in paid and unpaid activities, which is also revealing a lot. Time diary enables respondents to report all activities undertaken over a prescribed period of time and the beginning and the ending time of each activity. Suppose somebody is washing clothes. So at 9 a.m., she starts washing clothes and she finishes at 9:30 a.m., suppose, or 9:46 a.m., not exactly like that. So it's like that. Then she goes on to cooking. So exactly at what time you are doing what kind of activity. Now, there are two basic type of time diaries generally used. One is a basic type of diary, uh, which is what I'm talking about, and the other is a light or the simplified time diary. You do not exactly tell exactly at 10:36 a.m., not like that. But I did this activity for this amount of time, this much of hours. It's not exactly, it's a light or simplified version of time diary. Suppose you are being asked that what did you do today in the morning, and then you try to tell, look, at 9 o'clock exactly I was doing this activity, and then I took roughly 40 minutes to do that, like that. So it's a light or simplified time diary, but basic time diary is writing exactly the respondent spots the time and beginning of an activity, end of an activity. So this is a time use survey and UN guidelines, according to UN guidelines 2005. So what are we trying to do in the time use survey? Inclusion of the excluded activities. So the basic objective of a time use survey is inclusion of excluded activities. Now, what are the excluded activities? What are the activities that are excluded? One is information on the time spent in unpaid care activities, volunteer work. Suppose you volunteer to do some work, unpaid domestic service, learning, socializing, leisure, self-care, etc. Second is something which is not generally mentioned, but I'm just mentioning in the context of the farmer's question, which has come up so live in our everyday life today. Invisibility of women farmers. In census data, women cultivators and women agricultural laborers as percentage sharply fell in 2011 from 2001. But the reality is otherwise. If you see the large number of women who are joining in the farmers' protest, they are not only wives of women or children of women, they have actually they are farmers themselves. These women are working in the family farm. It's family labor. If you look into the Swaminathan formula, you will find an FL, the family labor. So it's exactly the family labor. Most of this family labor is being provided by the women. I mentioned this as an example to show you that it's not only unpaid care work which is excluded, but these kind of work which is essential for our country, which is essential, which is a basic activity, agricultural activity, invisibility of women farmers. So this is also excluded. Even if you take the self-help groups, I've not mentioned in the slide, but it's even if you look at the SIGs, the self-help groups who are working in that way, they are using their house as their production unit, and they're working in the house. They are sewing materials, they're making confectionaries, they're making these things, and they are making some small spices, cookery items, jams, jellies, etc. But they do it uh, as a continuation of their housework. So they're generally excluded activities. So inclusion of these excluded activities, that is the household productive activities, household industries. So actually, if you look at the number in terms of census data, it's an example to show you that you have declining, but they are not declining. Even if you take the ICRISTAT survey, the stat survey of the villages, you would see a lot of women are working. At the same time, when we have a falling rate of labor participation for women, if you look into the survey, if you ask any women whether you're doing any work or not, she would say that I don't have time to answer your questions. So this is the problem. There is inclusion, there's excluded activities. There's too much of exclusion. Time use survey tries to include these excluded activities. And if you look into the list, it's a long list of excluded activities. How is this data collected? Let me speak a little bit on that. The United Nations Guidelines 2005 is talking, but before this 2005, India had the first time use survey in 97-98 of 8 states, and it was done before these guidelines. So it was also India, also not only India, many other countries. United States had a detailed time use survey, Australia had, South Africa had. Now we have the China had also a detailed time use survey. But this was in 2005 data, and this was the guidelines was telling, because why I'm mentioning these guidelines, because the 2019 Indian time use survey was according to these guidelines. So the data collection is for a full 24 hours. There are smaller time slots where literacy is high. In the countries where you have high literacy, you have smaller time slots. That is, the diary is giving you a time slot, 10 a.m., 10:20 a.m., 10:50 a.m., 10 to 12 a.m. So 12 p.m., what exactly you do here? So there are smaller time slots when literacy is high, but time slots are less when literacy rate is less, because they may not be able to recall, they may not be able to break up time in minutes in so small slots. Now, time use produces an alternative quantitative summaries of activities with respect to time. So it's a quantitative summary, basically. In terms of time, household collection of firewood, it would take 2 hours. Cooking, 2 hours, like that. So data, washing clothes, washing utensils, like that. So applicable to reference population. Now, but there must be a reference population, because it must be applied to people who are doing identical kinds of activities. It is not applicable, for example, to two people who are doing exactly two different kinds of things or two different kinds of lifestyles. So who are disaggregated with respect to age, sex, rural, urban, or other categories. Data can be exhaustive. That is, you may exhaust the 24 hours of the day, or you may select a part of the day. You may select morning, you may select evening, you may select afternoon, like that. There can be single activity or parallel activities. Now, one individual can can take up one activity at a point of time, but multitasking being applicable to women, they may take up parallel activities simultaneously. So sometimes your entries against a time may be more than one activity. Then you have to categorize which is the primary activity, which is the secondary activity, and which is really a parallel activity. That is, taking care of your child and cooking may go together, and also you are doing some other work. So data can be exhaustive or selective, and there can be single or parallel activities. Important qualifiers are context, what is the context of doing the activity, how much is the duration, how many times you are doing the activity, that is the frequency. Now, indicator of well-being and unpaid work. This has been discussed widely in the literature. Now, the mandate of the Beijing platform is to document. That is, you have to document. So this is one of the mandates of the Beijing platform. Now, All India Time Use Survey is that was taken up in 2019. It was a single day survey. That is, throughout India, the sample population were being asked to fill in a diary on one single day from 4 a.m. to 4 a.m. next day. It was like that. Now, this time diary was filled by interviewers in 30-minute slots through face-to-face interviews. So, as you can see, that this time diary was filled by interviewers in 30 minutes time slots through face-to-face interviews, because they were in India, they were not being asked to fill up the diary, but they were being interviewed. So the respondent has to communicate with an interviewer in 30, and the time slots were 30 minutes. Now, the activities, which are the activities were chosen? The International Classification of Activities for the United Nations Statistics Division was used. So, this standard United Nations classification was used. Now, why it was used? Because it was a part of the Sustainable Development Goals program. So, the United Nations classification was used. This was the first national level all state time use survey. The earlier 97, 98 was not covering all the states. Now, this was the recent 2019 time use survey. If you want to click onto the results, you can go into the Ministry of Statistical Planning website, and you can extract the data from the time use survey. You can look at the data. Many of the time use survey results are coming out in the newspapers to look at the difference. I'll just share with you a little some little observations, not all observations, to show you how you are going to analyze this time use survey when you look into the time use. So how do you analyze this data? From the raw data of the time use survey in 2019 for women in agriculture, again, I'm coming back to agriculture because this is a problem with which we are living with. The key point is that this was Anil Kumar mentioned this. Now, these points are mentioned when there was a wide-ranging sharing of time use survey results and the whole analysis by a session organized by CWDS, some in November, I think, the time use survey results. So the working hours, men versus women, in those engaged in agriculture, as you can see, the working hours for men was 483 minutes versus 575 minutes. So it's the average working hours. So you see the inequality in the time consumption. So how does it contradict our census results? In our census, we find a drastic fall in the number of women cultivators as well as sharecroppers in the literature, in the data. However, if we look into the consumption of time in terms of minutes, so in the whole one day, 4 a.m. to next day 4 a.m., on average, the men were using 483 minutes versus women were using 575 minutes. So women were devoting more time. So as women were devoting more time, women were working more, but it is not visible in our secondary data. Learning, socialization, etc. Men were spending 221 minutes versus 171 minutes by women. So as you can see, this is just an example to tell you, but there are, as you can see, it's a mine of data. It's a mine of information from which is revealing a lot of things. So what is learning and socialization? What's that basically? Learning and socialization. Learning socialization is development of one's own self. This is learning and socialization, one's own selves. And then this development of self-development, men are spending more time, 221 minutes versus 171 minutes by women. So women even have spent lesser time on socialization. The family time is for women. So you think that the socialization for women should have been much more, but for the rural women, this is also not true. Self-care, including sleep time, 736 minutes for men and 695 for women. So as you can see, this is for particularly women in agriculture. So as you can see, how this data is being presented, it is like that. You select a particular group. Why? Because all of them carry out similar activities, so that the average would be having a meaning. Otherwise, the average doesn't have any meaning. In the earlier 1999 survey that I am referring to, they had a category of for time on community service. That is household care, but recorded very little time on it. And this was mentioned in that discussion by Rajni Palliwala, that this community service is no longer here in this, because as this is framed totally in terms of the guidelines of UN 2005 guidelines, and the activities were chosen according to that classification. Now, Indira Hirve raised a point in one of the recent articles which came out in newspaper. It came out in Hindu during this period of time when the Time News survey was presented, that NSSO is carrying on employment-unemployment surveys. But the comparability can be tested, that whether this employment-unemployment surveys and the Time Use surveys are giving you identical results, because the comparability can be tested if the sample is drawn from the same set. Now, as you can see, now I come back to my first slide. So what are the new things that the Time Use surveys are talking about? Is it correcting the biases? No, it is not correcting the biases. Is it correcting the patriarchal setup of the society? No, it is not correcting. But it is just focusing on the inequality in use of time by men and women. Why? It is to record the kind of bias in the society. Because if you look at this difference, if I go to my last slide, if you look into this difference, yes, I go on to this last slide. This difference in the sleep, it is telling us when a person is not sleeping, why is it true that even the sleep and self-care time is greater for men and less for women? So women are getting lesser time to take care of herself. So women can get lesser time to take care of herself. So that is important. So when women are taking lesser time to take care for herself, she is working. So when she is working, then what is the use? When she is working, what kind of activities she is taking up on? Lesser sleep means more work. Lesser self-care means more work. So these are some of the things which are revealing in this Time Use survey, and you can go and look into the data of the Ministry of Statistics in the CSO website, where these data is stored. So using a time diary, versus questionnaire method. I'm coming to this again. So will a questionnaire be able to reveal this lesser sleep time? Because if you ask women how whether you are sleeping properly, she would say yes. Do you sleep adequately? How many hours do you sleep? She couldn't recall. She couldn't have recalled even. If you ask the men, this difference in the sleep time will not, and self-care time wouldn't come out. So the dichotomy power relations, and in fact the difference within the households. I'm using the examples of the women farmers particularly. I'm using the example of the rural women particularly because that is being less talked. Even if we talk about the time use survey, if you talk about the time use survey, it's mostly the unpaid work that is coming out. In fact, some days ago, I find in the newspaper, uh, this discussion is coming up that the housework needs to be paid. It's not exactly the problem. Even if the housework is paid, even if it is paid, there is inequality in time use of men and women in the society, inequality in the distribution of time of doing each activity. So I think we can now have some questions, and if with these questions, I think we will come to more discussion, because these topic needs to be discussed more and more widely. I'm not claiming that time use is a perfect method. It's not. No method, no research method is a perfect method. But still, this is one of the ways in which attempt is made to correct some of the biases, to include the exclusions, to include the excluded ones, and to understand that how the patriarchal setup and how patriarchy and the market work together to have this inequality um, between men and women's time use clearly depicted in terms of the time use. So time is one of the time is your one of the mirrors through which one can see the inequality between men and women. So it is essential for the gender analysis. So thank you. And now I am open to answer your questions. I can see the chat box if there is any questions, or how do we go about it?
Thank you,
Yes.
ma'am. I think if anyone have any questions, they can unmute the mic and speak because we are very less in number. Otherwise, they can put it in the chat box. I can read the questions. Okay, the feedback link. I think there is some problem with the link. I'll try one more time.
Professor Ishita has brought out very important questions in the time use surveys. I think I request Professor Ishita to repeat the distinction between free time and rush time, as many did
Yes.
not join. Yeah.
Okay. To repeat that. Okay. I'll share
Yeah.
the slide.
Yeah.
Yes. This is the slide. Actually, there are lots of papers being written around that, and lots of researches being there. So this is a paper by Mattingly and Sayre in 2006. I think it's a Sage open access journal, so you can access that. This is talking about there are two kinds of there are two kinds of time: free time and rushed time. Free time means when you are free to do a work when you are free or leisure, you can relax and do the work. Or you rushed time means when you are rushed through your time to do the work. Like multitasking, when you do two, three things together, which is applicable to women, it's a rushed time. So women suffer from an increased time pressure, meaning uh, if you ask every woman, they would say, yes, I don't find any time of the day. I don't see, it's so much rushed. It's too much doing this, doing that, doing this. So this is a kind of a setup. So this is a free time and rushed time which this paper used, and I find it quite interesting because even if you do a multitasking, it's a rushed time. So people say that this is an advantage for the women. So whether it's an advantage or basically disadvantage on behalf of the women, because it's really distinguishing between your free time, you relax and do a work and see the quality of the work. When you are not relaxing, you're suffering under time pressure, you do the same work, you are having this pressure on yourself, and also the quality of the work ultimately gets affected. So there's an increased time pressure, meaning that there is an inequality in time use patterns of both women and women. It's not only the way, in number of hours, it's basically also talking this paper in terms of the pressure, the time pressure. There is no measurement of this time pressure. So you have to ask whether you are pressurized when you're doing multiple activities at a point of time. It's like that. So I think is there some questions? No, it is the feedback link. Okay. So is this okay, Professor Manimakalai? I think it's okay. The answer, the free time and the rushed time.
Sorry, I kept speaking without unmuting. How do you see the methodology used way back in India, even before
Yeah,
UN introduced,
1999. Yeah.
and mm, and now the UN guidelines? How I mean,
Yes, there is a slight change in the methodology. The diary method is still there. Diary method is the standard method of doing a time
used.
use of a diary. Now, there are two
Yeah, yeah.
ways. One is that when you can fill the diary yourself, or you can, or somebody can ask a respondent the question. So you have to stay with that respondent for one whole day. So earlier, this articulation of these kinds of data were not coming in, and some other activities were there in the 1999 also. In fact, many of the inequalities also came out during that period of time, the 1999 period. It also came out. This was an eight-state survey, but this survey is the first of the national kind of a time use survey. So the differences in activities, difference in the method, difference in the sample selection, because you have to need a homogeneous group within which you are to discuss, within which you are to put on this. You need, because people must be doing the similar kinds of activities, right? So otherwise you cannot compare, right? So there is a difference in the method, there is a difference in sample selection. That way it is differing, but the objective of both the time use is the same. And it also was revealing this inequality in time use. Only the method is different.
Yes, yes, that is the fact. That's what I want to also just
Yeah, yeah.
as an extension of the question. The very objective of this time use survey is to show that there are gender inequalities in the time used. That is on the one hand. On the other, how women's time is taken for granted, and most of the time are
Right.
being considered as unproductive for the whatever the work that a woman do are not counted as productive work, and accordingly that time is not actually taken into consideration. But the issue I'm raising, or the question which it is for the sake of others also. That where are we? I mean, what is actually the contribution of these time use surveys in the policies? That is the ultimate, isn't it?
Yes, the
Hmm.
policies.
Yeah.
Now, actually, this inequality would reveal the differences in the activities which the employment unemployment surveys were not revealing. So, the
Yeah.
purpose of the time use survey is to reveal the data, reveal the information due to work which the employment unemployment survey was not revealing. But let me tell you here that time use surveys are not only used in the world to detect only employment. In my country, it has been always used to detect the unpaid care work, unpaid, paid and unpaid services. In fact, Indira Hiraway has written much about that. But there are many countries, South Africa, Australia, etc., but even with respect to public health programs, health, education, that there is a difference with respect to time. That if somebody falls sick, how much time one takes for rest. So that is also something important. Let me tell you a story which came out in the newspaper where it's the only time use survey would reveal the data. It's the daughter-in-law is being affected by COVID-19 and she was to be quarantined along with the family. The family said no, she cannot be quarantined because then who will cook the meals? Who will make the chapatis? Remember that famous book. So it's also
Which has
communicated to
in the COVID context also the same.
right, right. So this came out in the newspaper. So it can only come out with the time use survey results. I think there is a question in the chat box which came up. What are some of the challenges we might face while cleaning out time use data in the field? A warning against some common pitfalls. Yes, the time use survey cannot be done on it's a challenge to do it on an individual basis without an organization doing it, because if it's a diary, then you have to ask this women what were you doing and this in this period of time. So it is a breach of privacy also. You're asking both men and women, what were you doing at this point of time during the day? So when you are asking this question, it's a sensitive question. It's a breach of privacy also. So as it is, sometimes a woman may not want to reveal in front of the men. Men also will not be revealing in front of the women. So it's sensitive. So it's a challenge. So one has to overcome this challenge in other sorts of ways to work it out. Yes, any other questions? Yes, what is your take on the recent movement to give salary? That I mentioned. Even if you give salary to the housewives, it will not resolve the inequality in time use between men and women. It will not resolve the problem of the increasing unpaid care work. It will not resolve the problem on the inequality in workload distribution of men and women.
Now in Tamil Nadu, some of the parties' manifesto includes that.
I've seen it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Goa is already paying. You know that, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, they are paying the managed too.
Yeah.
But in other states, in Kerala also, they tried. There was a public interest litigation, but
Yes,
it
even
was not.
if you do it, it's a first step of recognition that of their work, but it is not resolving the problem of inequality in time use.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
true.
a resolution of this problem of inequality in
Maybe the
workload.
first one is that recognition, because
Yes.
that is what it is. But there are some issues. Even the other day, in one of the other discussions, there was a question that when it is implemented, will you really count it, like to whom you will pay, how would you say that they are the homemakers, and if at all, and the question that Chaitanya raised, and some of them who will be working also will be showing that they are homemakers, so the least leakages and pitfalls will be there, and how would you, so all these questions are there, but I said that already a model is there, and the Goa is very much implementing, so that won't be a big issue.
So,
So
any other
Chaitanya, if there
questions?
is no questions, is there any other questions? Just see, otherwise you
I
can
just
close.
see the chat box.
Okay.
Chat box, it's there. I've replied to all these questions in the chat box.
Yeah, there is
Yes,
another
one
Yeah, there is
missing
one
question.
more
message.
from Samhita.
Yeah,
You just
will
see
giving
there's on the
salary and insurance to homemakers lead to more dowry deaths? Actually,
not,
there is
not.
one cannot relate this to
Yeah,
that, but whether dowry will be reduced or not, um, mm, no, there is no relation. Apparently, there is no relation between.
for the moment, as you said, it is just recognition of their work,
Yeah,
and
but the
that
inequality
that
is
itself has
still
been
there.
missing, no, for the
Yeah,
long, for a
the,
long, and
yeah, but
so
the inequality in time use, the inequality in workload distribution remains. So,
yeah, it
whether
anyway
Ma'am,
may not
I would like to add one
really
more
have a
point.
stake on what is actually the, as you said, the inequality in
right
time use at all. You may be recognizing, and the compensation need not necessarily be reflecting on
biases,
the
yeah,
time,
Okay.
yeah,
yeah,
inequality.
Ma'am, I have one more, one more concern. Like that if we are implementing the scheme, I think that it may restrict women's mobility also. See, if they are paying for sitting in the
that
office,
also is a possibility. That
yeah,
also is a big possibility.
like we are trying to encourage women's education and employment in outside. But if you're paying them for doing the household works, the men usually may restrict women from going college or
Yeah, that
schools.
also may be a possibility. It's
Okay,
a deep possibility in that way.
okay.
Society is patriarchal, so whatever the new measures come, that will again be addressed with a patriarchal, misogynistic perspective.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
some reversal, I mean, it may be uh, fire back on the women itself. Okay, Chaitanya, you just see, you can close.
Yeah,
It's
and
already
it's
6:30.
also insisting in some ways that women should be confined to home or private spheres. Exactly so.
Yeah,
Exactly
that
so.
is
The question
Yamini. Yeah.
that is, since you're paid, you must be there. You're
Mm.
legalizing. Yes,
Yes, that's
you're
what I
making
want to
it
say also.
legal. That you have. That's why I was telling you that the inequality in the workload distribution, inequality in the time use is not eliminated. Is not eliminated. So that remains.
Is there any other questions? I think if so, we can wind up the session, right, ma'am?
Yes, thank you
You
all.
can.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
ma'am.
Yeah. Yes,
Thanks
yes,
to all.
Chaitanya.
I would like to express my sincere thanks to Ishita ma'am for the enriched session. And I think the topic is very relevant and it may help the academicians and scholars in this discipline. And I thank the team AIWSSF for the perfect logistic support. And thanks to all the participants for attending the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
And I have provided the feedback link. Please try to fill the
Thank you,
feedback link.
Ishita.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you. And thanks to the participants also. You have listened
Yeah.
to a very important, and as Ishna said, you can use it for your academic discussions and also for research. and there are number of literature available. You can also further read and get to know more. So once again, on behalf of all the participants here, and we have Bharathasan University, Regional Association for Women Studies, and the All India Women Study Students Forum, I thank Professor Ishita for being here to deliver the lecture on this time use surveys, particularly taking the latest developments and how it gendered and how it is revealing, etc. Thank you once again, Professor
I
Ishita.
am with you on. I'll try to be with you all on Wednesdays, but according to my workload, so I try to be there. Thank you. Thank you.